I've been involved in varying degrees with open space now for 5 to 6 years, and this is the first opportunity really that I've had to attend an international conference, a gathering for the international community and the elders and the new arrivals as well. So that opportunity was just too good to miss when it was here in Australia.
Sorry, I want to make one more adjustment.
Okay.
And you've been actually running open space sessions for how long now?
Probably 3 to 4 years now that I've actually been involved in applying them. So also a member of the listserv, which is this sense of does give a sense of international community where people can sort of explore practitioner problems or philosophical issues or a whole range of things, including the poetry contest, which is happening here at the session. So that was again one of the things that brought me to Marysville, was to see or to actually get some faces associated with the personalities and the names that I know of the listserv, and sort of get that human element to it. In effect, I suppose that's a lot about what open space is about, is bringing that human dimension into the space. So. Being philosophically having my own having that practice brought to life here.
What was the attraction of open space in the first place? What got you into it?
I was actually at a conference that was conducted in open space by Alan Stewart, one of the participants here now, and I sort of looked at this and thought, now this is a really interesting way to hold space and to have people interact, and the sense of it being. That idea of personal responsibility and self-management, that shifting of the control back into the group, which I think is quite different from the way I and the other practices and techniques of facilitation that I know, where the facilitator is very much the person in control.
Did you find it a difficult transition, or did it come very naturally, do you think, to let go? It was an attractive transition, but yes, it's a difficult transition to make that and to be in that state of releasing control and just being. And so it's a constant discipline. One of the other things, probably as you'll know, David, from having encountered me over the last few days, silence is another thing that I have fairly some difficulties with maintaining. So yes, this sense of leaving a space open where silence doesn't necessarily have to be filled, and also leaving that space open where individual and personal responsibility can come in and start to self-organise. So it's a practice I work at, and the interesting thing about it is that I came to it initially as a technique, and the technique itself is quite simple when you look at it. Once you've passed that technique, then suddenly you're into the philosophy of it. And that's, I think, where some of the really major personal shifts come, because the principles and the law are not a bad set of principles and law to try and bring into your daily life and your daily practice, and think about how you can live by your own life as an open space. So what seems to, at a superficial glimpse, to be some kind of difficult to explain management strategy or way of managing organisations is actually much deeper than that, and
yes,
goes into the philosophical realm much more than you might imagine at first glance.
That's more than you'd imagine at first. It does operate. It operates on many levels, and I'm sure I haven't plumbed them completely. It does keep unfolding, but that idea of what would it look like, and there's questions being asked at the sessions today. What would the total open space organisation look like? What would it be like in the process of peacemaking if you could actually, within communities and countries and globally, generate this sort of practice in terms of respect, personal responsibility, listening, moving where the spirit and energy take you? What difference would that make?
So just bring it back to the sort of day-to-day work that you do with it. I'm very interested in the global aspects. I think it's fascinating. But how do you sell the idea of open space to an organisation that might be, at first glance, quite reticent? Might think you're just a bunch of tree-hugging loopies, who've got a new religion.
I think an organisation has probably got to be aware of it. and be ready to accept it. So it wouldn't be something I would always suggest to an organisation. Sometimes it's a matter of having them grow in trust with you as a facilitator. There often comes a point where you actually ask them to make a leap of faith with you. You've seen the work I do. What I'm trying to do here is make the best professional advice I can give you, and my advice is this technique I think would be appropriate, but it's going to require an heroic step into the void on your part. You couch that, I'd probably couch it that way initially. Then if they're not too overwhelmed by that, say, and I understand that they've at least given me permission to move to the next stage of talking with them about it, then we'll talk through the process. This is a technique called open space. This is what will happen. When you release it, essentially you've handed the control and the agenda setting over to all the people within there, and you as the proponent from the organisation, the sponsor, maybe going to have to live with some of the stuff that, well, not maybe, you will have to live with some of the stuff that comes back out of that, and you may not like it. Are you willing to make that leap?
Yeah. And so you must have had some success stories where it's been taken on and proved to work.
Yes. I think as somebody said, one of the sessions here yesterday was, it works all the time, right? And most of the time it does. Most of the time it does. I think people can probably measure degrees of success as the session finishes. But oftentimes too, particularly if you maintain contact with the organisation, you'll come back and what may not have appeared to be quite just so at the end in terms of their initial expectations, what happens is that there's an evolution and a processing of what's come out of the session over several months afterwards, and there's an unfolding as people come to an appreciation. So I think one of the major successes that come to my mind was one of the very early ones that I did with an arts community, typically a very fragmented community that tends to fight for the little bit of funding that's around there. I didn't realise it, but at the end of the day, when we went round the circle and had the closing circle and people are talking to one another, there were a couple of people spoke, and I thought, there's certainly some friction here. What I didn't realise until afterwards, as I was then told that those people hadn't spoken to one another for 2 years. So the fact that they had actually moved on that day, so here's me looking at it going, that's a bit stilted, I'm not sure whether this is good. Has something happened today? Yes, it had. It had been a phenomenal shift.
And those who knew them saw that.
And saw that shift for what it was and how significant it was that it came out of the day, and the space was there to open up that dialogue. So that was a very fulfilling. Yeah. But again, an example of, had someone not told me that as a facilitator, I wouldn't have known. So I suppose there's always that thing about, you never know where the work you do reticulates.
Yeah, it's intriguing in the sense that when you hear Harrison speak about it, for example, he just looks at traditional ways of doing things and says, but that's silly, we shouldn't be doing that, let's not do it. And it sounds so simple when you hear it, and you've said similar things yourself, it's a very simple technique in fact, but it's got profound implications.
Yes, because it is, it's about a way of being and behaving. And I think particularly in a facilitated session, often people will say, well, you've brought the facilitator in, we hand control to the facilitator. You're the facilitator, you're running the day. It's over to you. And you're then saying to them, no, you're grown people, you've actually got up this morning, you've made a raft of decisions involving your personal life and involving how you're going to get here today, and you've made this responsible decisions. Why is it that when you step through the door, you're willing to abnegate all of those and pass that control back to me? This is ridiculous. Why should here be any different to out in the... Because probably what you're dealing with in here is often more complex than what you're dealing with out there. The control is back with you. You have the power and the personal responsibility with it. And unless that buy-in exists, when you as the facilitator leave, if you're a high control facilitator, once you take that high control or high guidance away, the group withers. So what this does is imbue that spirit of responsibility. one of the big things with open space, I think, that people often criticise, that the walk to the centre. Oh, that's a horrible thing to ask people to do. What happens to shy people who won't walk to the centre? I suppose my response to that is, if they won't walk to the centre, what's the likelihood, if they do be heard and do propose something, that they're willing to act on it and carry it through? So the first step is probably, it's a difficult one, but it's going to be one of many difficult ones in order to bring their particular need to fruition. So that passion needs to be there and to drive it through. So in a way, it's the first filter.